Before we get started with today's show, I'm here to tell you about Brez Coffee Company, made by gamers for gamers right here on the Gulf Coast in Pensacola, Florida. Do you like light or medium roast? Then try the Necro Medium, Holy Grail Light, or Stamina Boost. Or if you're like me and prefer darker roast, try the Critical Dark or the Coup Slayer Mocha Roast. But what if you can't pick just one? Then try one of their specialty sample packs, perfect for an all-night gaming, or in the case of my fellow filmmakers, an all-night editing session. Forget about all the crappy coffee you've been buying at the grocery store and head on over to brezcoffeeco.com. Use the promo code DDE at checkout to get 10% off your order. Have you ever thought to yourself after listening to this podcast, why didn't Derek ask this question? Or why didn't he ask that question? I know I certainly have. Well, you get the chance to do that if you sign up for my Patreon at patreon.com/DDiamondPodcast. You get the chance to ask guests of the show a question. If you're a fan of the top 5 list, you get the chance to vote on what the topic will be. You also get early access to episodes, accessibility to my film scripts, and so much more. And you can do so by heading over to patreon.com/DDiamondPodcast. And we want to thank our patrons, Tim Spivey and Shannon Williams. Thanks so much for your continued contributions. And now, on with the show. Welcome to the Derek Diamond Experience podcast, where every week I take a look inside the world of film and television with those who have lived it and experienced it. I am your host, Derek Diamond, and for those who are watching the video version of the podcast, you see that made a couple of little changes to the studio. If you follow me on social media, you've seen that kind of a month-plus project that I've been working on has been remodeling the studio that I record all of my podcasts in, this, Nerd Cave Retro, anything podcast related I do in this room. And it was really overdue. If you saw the photos, I mean, it was kind of junky with, my computer desk stashed in the corner of the room, there being boxes and just cables and everything piled everywhere. This table that all my equipment's sitting on was just right in the middle of the room, so took the week off of work after the 12-game homestand ended a couple of weeks ago, and that was kind of my week-long project, was just to transform this room into what it is currently. And as you can see, I've added some artwork or some pictures on the wall behind me. I still have the sound panels all around the room, but I knew the aesthetic needed to change a little bit. I wanted to keep the brick. I really like the brick quite a bit, but wanted to give a little bit more life and personality to the walls whenever I do these podcasts. So just a heads up for those that will be watching the video version or do it on a regular basis. I did record several interviews before I made the switch. So if you see that, during this opening portion of the show, there's these 2 pictures in the background, and then you watch the interview portion and it looks like it used to, that's why. So it might look a little weird, and for some of you, it may not be that big a deal. I know I personally notice little things like that when I'm watching videos. So that's the explanation as to why the video might look a little different than you've seen in the past, and will probably look that way for a few weeks. It's crazy because I've done enough interviews now to really be set through the end of October, and a lot of really, really good conversations, a lot of behind-the-scenes business discussion as far as film goes, the business side of film, that you'll be hearing about over the next few weeks. And the conversation you'll be hearing today, I really was looking forward to this when it was booked, and that is with cinematographer Seamus Tierney, who's been working in the industry for a while and most recently was cinematographer for the Mighty Ducks Game Changer series on Disney+. So it was cool to get to pick his brain about that and what's the process of what a director of photography goes through when they're hired onto a project, and getting to kind of pick his brain about what was his inspiration behind the way they filmed specifically the hockey scenes of that series the way that he did. And just getting to talk about a side of the industry that I don't really get to talk about all that often. But that'll be coming up a little bit later on in the show. But before we get to that, I did want to touch on CinemaCon. And it recently wrapped. I believe it wrapped on the 25th or the 26th of August. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. But it was this big convention where some pretty big news stories came out. And I just wanted to touch on a few that really stood out to me. The big one being that we finally officially have the title of the fourth Matrix movie. It will be called The Matrix Resurrections and will be released in theaters and on HBO Max December 22nd of 2021. Co-written and directed by Lana Wachowski, who, of course, is one of the Wachowskis who directed and wrote the Matrix trilogy from back in the day. I was a teenager when the original Matrix came out, and I did not see it in theaters, but I knew of the hype behind this movie and hearing how groundbreaking it was with its visual effects. And when I watched it on DVD for the first time, my mind was just blown away by the visuals. The story, I thought, the concept was brilliant. With the world we live in is not real. And it kind of made you think, well, could something like this happen in the next 1,000 years, couple of thousand years? Who knows? I love sci-fi movies that make you think on what could possibly happen in the future. And The Matrix was no exception to that. Of course, we all know about the bullet time effect, the slow motion action sequences that we know is almost being overdone in a way, but that was all originated from The Matrix. So hearing that they were going to revisit that world kind of got me excited, and I know the sequels have very mixed reviews. I don't dislike them as much as some people do. Do I think they're as good as the original? No. To me, The Matrix 1 is in a tier all in itself when it comes to groundbreaking visual effects when it comes to movies of that time, or at least it's in that upper tier of sci-fi film. And then the sequels I put a bit below that. Still visually great. I didn't like the stories as much, but I can think of far worse movies than The Matrix Reloaded and Revolution. So I'm really excited that they're going back and revisiting that world. The fact that they're bringing back both Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss. I am disappointed they're not bringing back Lawrence Fishburne. I'm hoping that he may have some type of a cameo as a surprise to the fans. I believe he came out and said he wasn't asked to come back. I could be wrong in saying that, but who knows? I mean, he could be saying that to fool the audience. Who knows? But I'll definitely be there when it's released. I do want to see it in theaters. I know HBO Max is much more convenient, but I feel like The Matrix is something that's worth watching in the theater. And I'm very curious to see what they do with the storyline. And from the footage that they showed at CinemaCon, it's not online, but I've read several descriptions, and that being that Neo is back in the real world, or the Matrix, and he has no recollection of his previous life. And he even meets Trinity at a coffee shop, and they kind of have a vague memory of, have we seen each other before? And then it goes into, all the action that we expect from that franchise. So really looking forward to it. I wish they would release that trailer online, but I'm sure we'll get one fairly soon because the movie's coming out in 3 months. It's crazy to think we're now in September. I'm still thinking it's August, but it's only a couple of months away. The other stories that really stood out to me, the other one being Top Gun Maverick, which found out today as I'm recording this that it has been pushed back yet again to May 27th, 2022. They showed the first, I believe it was 13 minutes of the movie, and it was pretty well received. And Top Gun is a not so guilty pleasure movie of mine. Do I think it's one of the best movies of all time? No. Is it one of my favorite movies of all time? Yes. It would be. If I made a top 10 list of my all-time favorite movies, then Top Gun would definitely be on it. I think it's the perfect summer movie because it's got action, it's got romance, it's got practically everything you'd want in a summer blockbuster. I still enjoy watching it to this day. I was a little shocked that they made a sequel after all these years, especially with Tom Cruise coming back. I'm excited to see it. It's unfortunate that it was pushed back yet again, but with COVID and the Delta variant and everything that's been going on, I get it. But it's crazy because in 2020, when it was originally supposed to be released, it was one of my most anticipated movies. Then when it got moved to 2021, it became one of my most anticipated movies of that year. Now that it's moved to 2022, it's one of my most anticipated movies of 2022. So for 3 years in a row, it's one of my most anticipated movies, which is kind of crazy to say. And then the other one I wanted to talk about was The Batman, directed by Matt Reeves, starring Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne / Batman, I believe. It comes out March of next year. Supposedly, the footage they showed looks very dark and very grounded. I'm curious to see if they go too dark with it, but I read that there was something that happens in what was shown that got people really excited for a sequel. I don't think we're going to get a trailer until DC Fandom, which I believe is sometime in October. I could be mistaken in that, but I'm curious to see what they do. I mean, my curiosity is always piqued when there's a new Batman or a new take on Batman, new iteration of Batman. And this won't be any exception. And people still give Robert Pattinson crap for the Twilight movies, but after seeing him in The Lighthouse, I buy him as a dark Bruce Wayne and a dark Batman. And I think the rest of the cast is pretty good too. You got Andy Serkis as Alfred, so we'll see what happens with that. But those were the three main talking points that I wanted to just kind of give my brief thoughts on. And I think Dune looks really good. They showed footage for the Godfather prequel, not Godfather, The Sopranos. What am I talking about? I never watched The Sopranos. I know it's really popular. One day I'll sit down and watch it. I don't know when that will be, but I know a lot of people are excited for the prequel, so we'll see what happens with that. But CinemaCon sounded fun. I hope one day that I can get to go to that. I think it'd be really fun. It'd be fun to do like a live reaction to, like a Warner Brothers event or a Paramount event. I think that'd be awesome. That would be really fun. But now we're going to turn the show over to my conversation with cinematographer / director of photography, Seamus Tierney. He, as I mentioned before, worked on the Mighty Ducks Game Changer series. It was great to just pick his brain about what he sees visually and get into a cinematographer's mind and really get into visual storytelling. So hopefully you all enjoy this conversation as much as I did. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Seamus Tierney. Welcome back to the Derek Diamond Experience podcast, and this week it's my pleasure to welcome cinematographer Seamus Tierney to the show. Seamus, how are you?
Good. How are you, man?
Fantastic. I've been looking forward to this conversation now for the last couple of weeks since we touched base through email, looking at your IMDb and your impressive run that you've had. And it's not very often that I get to talk pure cinematography on the show. So when you accepted the invite, I was really excited. So thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, it's my favorite subject.
Fantastic. So before we get started on some of your projects that you've worked on in the past, what was it that initially made you want to get into the world of filmmaking? Because since I've started doing this podcast, I've learned that there's not really a set way to do it. Almost everyone has a unique journey to get into the film industry. So what was it that made you want to get into it?
Yeah, I think from a pretty young age, my parents kind of encouraged us to watch a lot of movies. We, went to the movies. I grew up in Hawaii and Australia, and we can get into that. But, when I was a kid, and it wasn't even that long ago, but in Hawaii, it was like you could go to the movies during the day for like 50 cents, and you could get a public bus all the way around the island for 25 cents. So for me, for 75 cents, I could have a whole day of, ride the bus, watch a movie, ride the bus home. So it was kind of a no-brainer for filling a summer day or a weekend or something. So yeah, I mean, I kind of just became enamored with films from a young age. Spielberg, of course, and all those adventure movies. And then kind of when I was about, I don't know, 13 or 14, I decided that's what I want to do. I want to tell stories visually. And so it's been a journey since then.
Was there a specific film growing up? You mentioned Spielberg. Was there a specific film that made you say, okay, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, there was a couple. The ones that come to mind whenever I think about it, there was a director named Roland Joffrey. He did The Killing Fields. He did another movie called The Mission. Both those movies were hugely influential for me. And I saw them pretty young. And I realized that you could sort of convey an emotion or an idea visually with a lot of power. And I wanted to sort of try and be a part of that storytelling process. And I also saw, weirdly enough, I saw Yojimbo, the Kurosawa film, on like PBS one night, really late as a teenager, and I was like just blown away at the use of the camera and the way it told the story, and that Kurosawa definitely had a lot of influence on filmmakers that I grew up with, like Spielberg and Lucas. So I could see where that all came from when I saw some of his other work too. So yeah, those are the three that I kind of come to mind when anyone asks me that question.
When you bring up a great point that you can tell stories from a visual standpoint, obviously you have, your actors, your actresses that are conveying the emotions, but it's also all about the camera movement and the placement of the camera that really, adds that extra layer of the storytelling that, I didn't really even think about, because I was a huge fan of movies as well growing up, but it wasn't something that I really thought about until I started taking classes and then working on sets and really seeing how, director of photographies work with the directors and work with the actors on set to also tell that story from a visual standpoint. It just adds a whole new layer.
Yeah, it totally does. It's like the subtext of the idea of the emotion that you're trying to convey. And I think that's the thing that I try and always weave into the stuff I shoot, where it's like, you could just shoot it as a normal, like, wide shot over mouth, you know what I mean? I like to sort of put a little bit of intent or thought behind the shots that we choose, director and I, just to try and add, like you said, another layer. Because you can walk out of a movie and you can say, oh, that was the most beautiful movie ever, but it's better to have somebody walk out of a movie and say that was a great movie, and not necessarily really be able to put their finger on why, but if it's done with like good sound design, great acting, good production design, great photography, the score and whatnot, and it all just kind of comes together. That's kind of what you're looking to achieve, rather than somebody just saying, oh, that was beautiful. You know what I mean? Because it's fleeting. Beauty is fleeting.
No, absolutely.
But you remember the really good ones.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So kind of walk me through the process of what a cinematographer or director of photography does. So say you get hired to work on a project, what do you do from there?
Okay, so yeah, I get sent the scripts. I either get the job, I don't get the job. I usually interview with the director and the producers usually, because again, it's filmmaking is not an easy undertaking or venture. It's tough. It's long hours. You're going to be with this group of people for 3 to 4 months, and so you got to figure out how to get along first of all. But yeah, in terms of the process, we sit down and basically for about a month we talk through the whole script. What I like to do, we either shot list or storyboard depending on how the director likes to work. I look at that process as creating a dialogue and a blueprint to tell me what the story is and what the idea or emotion that particular director is trying to convey, and then I interpret that visually. And so we'll bounce ideas off of each other about how to shoot something, how much coverage do we need, what's the best way to visually convey the idea or the emotion that's written on that page. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then, obviously it gets more technical as you get closer and closer. And then after those initial conversations, then I start delving into how am I going to technically achieve this, meaning what kind of equipment do I need? But I try not to think about that just in the beginning. I try to have like a blank canvas and like the dreaming stage, where just I tell the director, don't limit yourself. Just how do you see this? Close your eyes, mind's eye. Doesn't matter how we're going to do it just yet. Like, do we need cranes or drones or whatever? Don't think about that yet. Just talk it through, because that's where you're going back and forth and you're sort of whittling down the idea of what you want your film to look like. You know what I mean? And then as you get closer, then I have to start stepping in and saying, okay, well, what equipment do I need to achieve this shot that we've designed? You know what I mean? Or what camera should we use? What lenses should we use? Used to be what film stock, and now it's like more what sensor do you want to use? Yeah, that's the basic beginnings.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you said that you don't automatically limit yourself by what equipment am I going to need, because if you're having a meeting with a director and you're thinking, okay, well, I only have access to X, Y, and Z, that really limits what you're going to do. And you could think of this really cool idea and like, oh, there's other ways to pull it off besides, oh, well, I don't have a crane, so I can't do it.
Yeah.
There are other ways you can make it
No.
happen. So
Yeah, totally. And I kind of love that stuff too, to be honest with you. Like that necessity is the mother of invention. Like, oh, you want that shot? And like, some people might say, oh, well, we can't do that without this piece of equipment, but that's rarely the case. There's so many when you get great crew people and you just get a bunch of people together, you can just come up with an idea of how to execute a shot without this fancy piece of equipment potentially, and some like weird, it's whether it's pulleys or a stick, with a camera on the end of it. There's always a way to get something close to what you had in your mind's eye, whether it be with the $250,000 piece of equipment, or a plank of wood with two people holding it on either end, and poor man's Steadicam. You know what I mean? So I kind of love all that stuff, to be honest.
well, that's the great thing about filmmaking is, now that because I've been on a couple of sets for short films that we filmed locally here where I live, and seeing how things work behind the scenes and how certain shots are pulled off, where you get, a couple of grips to hold a piece of equipment for the DP to get the shot that they want. Just seeing people come together like that is my favorite part of filmmaking. I make this joke on the show every now and then that I'm not a very sociable person, but I love the collaboration of filmmaking and what it takes to make a film happen, because it takes a village to make a movie, and just seeing things like that happen and become reality, and then you see the final product. There are very few more rewarding feelings, in my opinion.
I totally agree. That's like, I would say that's 99% of the reason why I do this job. It's like, I don't tell my agent this, but I would definitely do this for free. I would do it for food. If they just wanted to not pay me and pay me in food, I would still do this job.
Hey, food's a good payment.
Yeah, yeah,
Food is a very
that's
good
all you need.
payment. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, and I've learned that too with, working on, a couple of sets that I have, and then I directed my first short a couple of years ago.
Nice.
Food can go a long way
Oh, you bet.
when you have long days on set. You want to keep the crew happy, and the way to keep them happy is usually through food. So
Yeah, totally. Feed them well, and they'll be a little less grumpy. Yeah.
no, for sure. But to backtrack a little bit, so you decide that this is what you want to do. You want to be a visual filmmaker. You want to work in cinematography. Where do you go from there? Do you go off to college? Because you mentioned you lived in Australia and Hawaii. Like where were you living at the time that you decided this, and then what was your next step from there?
Okay, so I grew up, like I said, in Hawaii and Australia. I was in Australia for a while, and I sort of did what a lot of Australians do. They go on kind of a walkabout. So I traveled the world for a couple years after I got out of school, and eventually wound up back in New on the East Coast of America, New Jersey, New York. And I had no idea how to get into film. I knew that I wanted to, and I knew that I wanted to do it in New York as opposed to Los Angeles. It's because I liked at the time the films and the ideas that were coming out of New York. They were a little bit more independent and a little bit more gritty. Uh, so a friend, the guy, I was working in a coffee shop, and this guy that I was working with had cut out this little piece of paper from the Village Voice that said film PAs wanted and a number. I didn't even know what a film PA was. So I call the number, I go in, I get the job. They pay me like $50 a week, $50 a week. So they like, I think I was like an intern, which I think you can't do that anymore. But back then they gave me like a roll of subway tokens, which don't even exist anymore either. So I was a like an office PA for the first couple of weeks of this production. We weren't shooting yet. So then when we started shooting this very small movie, it was called Peroxide Passion, directed by a guy named Monty Diamond, who was Luc Besson's location manager or production manager or something. Anyways, so we get to the on set part, and they were like, okay, well, you can set up craft service. So I would set up the craft service, and then I would watch these groups of these other guys, these technicians working the grip electrics. And I was watching them for the first couple of days, and I was seeing what they were doing, and I was like, yeah, I could do that. And like they were short staffed because it was a low budget film. So they'd get on the walkie, or they'd yell out, they're like, oh, bring me this, this, this. And so I'd like figure out what they were asking for, and I would go grab it and run and bring it to them. You know what I mean? So it's slowly, and by the end of that job, one of the gaffer was like, I want that guy to work for me. He's not doing craft service anymore. He come with me. And so it kind of just went from there. And I started working for that guy, Tom Hamilton, and he took me under his wing. And then I was an electrician for a long time, set lighting guy. I did that for about in total 7 years. So I worked my way up. I was an electrician, and became a best boy, and then a gaffer. But in the meantime, I started shooting because I knew I wanted to be a DP. So I would bug the hell out of every DP that I ever worked for. I would just say, why are you doing that? What are you doing over there? What's this? And like some of them were cool, and some of them were just like, shut up and go get me that light. But there was a handful of really nice guys and girls that were like, like break it down for me and like help me out. So about, I don't know, maybe 4 years into that, I started shooting short films for grad students at Columbia University and at NYU, because at Columbia they didn't have a cinematography program. I still don't think they do, but anyway. So the grad students at Columbia, they had a really strong writing program. So they had lots of really good scripts, but they had no DPs. So they would hire out, and we would shoot. They'd want to shoot 16 millimeter, and so I would take the money that I was earning as an electrician and a lighting guy, and I would say, look, let's shoot on film, but let's shoot 35, and I'll pay the difference between what the cost of shooting 16 to 35. And that way I was building up my show reel, all with the intention of applying to grad school at the American Film Institute, which I did in, I think I got accepted in 2001, maybe, 2001, 2002, maybe. And so I got accepted into AFI, and then I went out to California, and I went to AFI for about 2.5, 3 years. And I got hired to shoot my first movie before I'd graduated. I had to stop filming the day of our graduation and go graduate and then come back and keep shooting that night. Yeah. And it just kind of went from there.
That's awesome. So you truly worked your way up. You know, you started as a PA and then, but I think it was really cool that you would pick everyone's brain. Like, why are you doing this? How are you supposed to do this? Why are you doing it that way?
Yeah.
That's exactly what you should do. You know, that
Yeah.
the
I was like a
best,
sponge.
well, that's the best way to learn it. It's interesting that you did all of that before you went to school. So it's almost like you had that preconceived knowledge while you were in school. Do you feel like that helped you when you were in
Oh,
school?
definitely, definitely. Because this, especially going to, if you're going to go to undergrad, it might be different. But for me and who I am, I needed the practical hands-on learning as opposed to reading something in a book. Just because that's the way my mind works, and I needed to get my hands dirty and figure it out and see it. And lighting, I'm just fascinated by lighting because it is infinite in its possibilities. There's 16 million ways to light a scene, and it still blows me away to this day. Like, shine a light off this piece of fabric and it creates this type of quality of light. Anyways, so that was always something that I really wanted to try and get as close to mastering, even though I don't think you can ever really master it. You can get good at it, but it's always going to throw something new at you. But I knew I wanted to have that knowledge before I started to shoot. And the reason why I decided to go to grad school was that at that point, it allowed me to stop working, because I worked so much. I worked, like 6-7 days a week for 6 years straight, 7 years straight. And in order to make the jump from a gaffer to a cinematographer, I knew that I had to cut one off. I couldn't have foot in both worlds, at least I didn't think I could. So I needed to stop and go to grad school and do nothing but study cinematography for 2.5-3 years, which is great. But to answer your question more pointedly is that, yes, I think the knowledge that I had of on-set knowledge going into grad school helped me immensely, because I could fast track those things and concentrate more on storytelling and how to tell a story visually, not necessarily from the lighting, but camera movement, camera placement, staging. Yeah.
No, and I totally get where you're coming from, because I'm much more of a visual learner than I am with a textbook. I can remember when I was in college, I was reading about how to edit, and I wasn't really grasping the concept of it. But once I sat down at a computer and they're like, okay, this is what you're supposed to do, I'm like, oh, okay, this is pretty easy. I mean,
Yeah.
I want to say easy because I don't want to downplay editing, but it was much easier for me to pick that up from the visual standpoint. So that's really cool, that because you hear most everyone went to school first and then went out into the work field, but you doing the opposite is pretty fascinating to me, because you were doing what you wanted to do, but you still felt the importance to go to school, and I think that's great.
Yeah. And then also some folks that I went to school with, like, once they got out, they still had to start further down the rung. They had to, like, some of them had to go into lighting, some of them had to become camera assistants. It's like, but I got to kind of skip that, a little bit. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm with
but
you
everyone
on,
has their own path.
Yeah. And I'm with you on the lighting too. It still fascinates me to this day that there's so many combinations in it. You can make a slight little turn and you're like, oh my God, that's exactly what I wanted. So
yeah. I look at, like, even this in my room down here, I like, oh, look, now I'm all silhouetted against the background. Or now I'm in half light,
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
It never ends.
Yeah, for sure. So I do want to talk about one of your specific projects, one of your more recent ones. That was, you were the cinematographer for the Mighty Ducks Game Changer series on Disney Plus. I was, like most people of my generation, a big fan of the Mighty Ducks franchise. So when I found out that the series was coming out and that, like Emilio Estevez was coming back, they were going to bring back some of the original cast, I was geeked up about it. But watching it from a cinematic storytelling standpoint, I really enjoyed it. And I wanted to ask you specifically, were you aware of the Mighty Ducks popularity, back in the 90s before you signed on for this?
Yeah, I definitely saw the first movie when I was a kid. Having grown up in Hawaii and Australia, we didn't have a lot of exposure to hockey or ice skating. But I definitely saw the movies when I was a kid. And I knew that it had this like tremendous fan base. So I was super excited to be a part of it for the reboot. And plus, Emilio Estevez. I love Emilio Estevez, who is great, by the way, who's a completely awesome dude. Yeah, so I was super excited to be asked to do it. And I had just finished a film with Steve Brill, who is the creator of the Mighty Ducks sort of franchise. He wrote the first one, and he directed the I don't know if he directed any of the movies. He might have, but he definitely wrote, and that's his intellectual property. And so we just finished doing Hubie Halloween for Adam Sandler and Netflix. So we had finished that, and he said, "Hey, I'm doing the reboot for Mighty Ducks. Do you want to come and shoot the show?" And I said, "Look, I'm not really a big TV shooter, even though now my eyes are open and like TV is like so great now. But I was like, oh no, I'm an artist. I only do films, But I've since changed my tune because there's some really good quality TV out there, and they wanted Mighty Ducks to look like a 10-part sports movie. Do you know what I mean? They wanted a very specific cinematic look. And that was the sort of challenge they gave me. And yeah. So I said yes. I said yes for sure.
It's something that I did also want to ask you specifically about the series. I thought the way that the hockey specific scenes when the games were going on, I think the way they were shot was extremely well done. What was kind of your inspiration, or how did you come up with how that looked, and how did you work with the director of the show about how those scenes specifically were going to look?
Yeah. So again, Steve Brill is a huge hockey fan. So he was adamant about us getting the hockey right. And really, I think what he pinpointed was that he wanted it to be visually as real and you were able to follow the puck and like the gameplay. Hockey is fast, very fast. It's a very fast moving sport. Even just watching it on TV, they just put cameras around and they follow that puck and it's just fast. But I wanted to, along with Steve, and we had an amazing sort of hockey expert, Coach Dave. Oh, I'm not gonna remember his last name. He was awesome though. Coach Dave, what's your last name? Anyways, I'll think of it. But so I worked closely with him, and he and I and the directors of the episodes would come up with plays and then ways to cover them. Originally, I had this little I wanted them to build me this scale model rink, and I was going to shoot it with like a lipstick camera, but COVID hit and we never got around to it. We had so many other things to do, but that was my original idea. I was going to shoot all the plays and sort of make what we call animatics, like visual moving storyboards, maybe for next season, but we can talk about that in a minute. So yeah, basically to answer your question, we would figure it out all ahead of time. And then, the kids would train with the coaches on the moves and the stuff. And then they would also train with doubles and stunt people for when we needed stunts to be to replace the kids. And then as far as camera, we had a pretty extensive testing period about how to shoot the hockey. And I went through a bunch of from the top notch, sort of technical way to do it down to the bottom of the barrel, kitchen sink. What's the indie way of doing it? And, a couple of those were we put actual camera dollies on the ice and we had guys pushing the dollies with operators and fluid heads. And then we tried that same setup with gyro heads, like Ronins and Movies. And then we had a couple of rigs where the kids would be like on a platform with like a pole in front of them, and they'd have we had Teflon, and they just have their socks on so they could slide back and forth and look like they were going. And then a cameraman would sit on the front and operate, but in the end, my favorite was really just a camera operator, handheld, either on these little like wheelbarrow type things we made with like little Teflon or Teflon Kevlar, I think it was, maybe little platforms, right? Like almost like a skate, but like a disc, and
Right.
they would just sit on there. And then thank goodness we were up in Canada, because all of my dolly grips were, almost everybody on the crew were, they like born on skates, so they would just get out there and be like whip around like it was nothing, and like I kind of made the requirement that my operators had to know how to ice skate, and then the technicians had to know how to be proficient in ice skating, and they all were, because they're all Canadian. It's like a national pastime. So there was nobody who didn't know how to skate except me. So anyways, we had all these crazy ideas of like the high tech way to do it, but in the end, my favorite, to be honest, was the simplest, just an operator with a camera on their shoulder, handheld, because what that did was everything else where you had a fluid head or a remote head, they wouldn't be able to react fast enough to where the puck was going. You needed a human's eye on that lens to go, boom, there it is, boom, up to this kid's face, boom, down to the hockey. You know what I mean? It just, you had to be that in it with the camera in order to capture it. So that was a nice lesson to learn. We learned that about halfway through the first episode. We're like, throw away all these fancy toys. Let's keep it simple,
It's amazing how that works sometimes, that you think of all these complex things to do, but sometimes it's just the simplest things work. And it makes me think of, like, because I work also for a minor league baseball team we have here in town. And, because we're kind of clued in on that, some sports might go to robotic cams as far as like baseball and other sports, but I don't think you can totally do that. And your story says exactly why, because you still have to have that human element of knowing when to whip around to get the puck or whip around to get the baseball or basketball, whatever the case may be. So that's really cool, because, as I was watching the series and the hockey sequences specifically, I kept thinking to myself, how did they do that? How did they make it look this good? And now I know. So no, thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, we did have some toys sometimes, like we had we had a techno crane, which really was a more of a time, it allowed us to get through our days faster, but that was not really for a lot of action stuff. That was more for coverage, because it's like shooting on ice is like shooting in the sand or in water. Things just move slow, it's slow to move equipment around, and the kids just want to ice skate. It's like herding cats. So these kids are like, they're 14 years old, and they get out on the ice, and all they want to do is just slap the puck and tackle each other, and like have fun. And we're all doing a job and like trying to get the days, and but we made it work, I think.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. But as we start to wrap up here, I did want to ask you, what are some other projects that you have coming up that you're currently working on?
Yeah, so I'm doing a little comedy special for Netflix in a couple weeks here for a woman named Catherine Cohen, and then we're going to start prep with Mighty Ducks 2. Season 2 is coming, so they're gonna start consulting on that about where we're going to shoot it, and if we have to rebuild some stuff like some sets, or do we want to improve the sets and make them a little easier to work with, or basically what did we learn from last season that we can improve on. And I think, to your point, I think we can make the hockey even better. I'm going to try and make the hockey this season like even more concise and just more visceral. I think, I don't know how I'm going to do it yet, but I'm going to come up with some, again, cheap way to do it. Easy way.
I like that word, visceral. That's good.
Yeah.
What is one piece of advice that you could give to an aspiring filmmaker?
Yeah, I mean, watch movies, study movies, and just shoot as much as you can. Just be creating content. Even if you think it's bad, you'll learn from your mistakes. Just keep shooting. Always be shooting is what I say.
Absolutely. And last question before we get out of here, do you have any website or social media you'd like to plug so the listeners can follow you?
Yeah, you can go on to my Instagram. It's what is it? Seamus T.dp, I think. I hardly ever go on there, so it's pretty bad. But I could send you a link.
Yeah, for sure. Fantastic. Well, Seamus, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. This was great.
Derek, I appreciate it, man.
Thanks again to Seamus Tierney for that awesome conversation. Be sure to follow him on Instagram and check out his website to find out what he'll be up to next. And if you want to check out myself and my podcast on social media, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at @DDiamondPodcast. If you want to subscribe to the show, I'm on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcast for free. Just search for The Derek Diamond Experience. And if you could, please leave a review. The more reviews I get, the more visible I become to the podcasting public. You can also find video versions of the show on YouTube. Just search for Derek Diamond and you can find all the shows there. I'm also on Patreon at patreon.com/DDiamondPodcast if you want early access to episodes, the opportunity to ask guests of my show a question, vote on the monthly top 5 list. Everyone loves the top 5s. If you want to contribute to the show, I'll probably add some more stuff in the coming months now that my schedule has freed up a little bit. So if you want to sign up for just as little as $2 a month, $2 a month gets you early access to episodes and also gets you early access to the monthly watch-along shows that I do, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the original 1990 movie. Most recently, I watched the first episode of the Loki series, and I'll be watching Clerks later this month with my friend Thomas Carter Rochester. So if you want to be a part of that, just head on over to patreon.com/DDiamondPodcast. And of course, thank you to my close friends, the Unicorn Wranglers, for providing the theme music for the podcast. You can check out all their music on Apple Music, Google Play, and Spotify. That's going to do it for this week's show, so enjoy the rest of your week. Have a safe and fun weekend. Thank you for tuning in to another awesome episode of the Derek Diamond Experience. I'm your host, Derek Diamond, and we'll see you guys back here next Thursday.